Welcome to the Bracket Factory and welcome to my latest video about my fight being the operative word, with the Big V12 engine. So the question is, am I winning or am I losing? I'll let you be the judge of that. Right, it's now time to try and sort out this oil filter housing. If you saw the last episode, you see that the whole thing being bent up into there. So inside here is a shaft that's bent. This is all stoved in. It's all a bit grotty and messy. There's some kind of oil filter pipe which is, I think it's snapped off. Yeah, that's snapped off there. I need to get it all off, clean it all up, find out what's going on, fix it and stick it back on. So that's next. So got the oil filter housing off pretty easily. The issue is that this central spindle is bent. So I'm going to clean all this up because it's absolutely filthy. And over here we've got another load of parts, and this housing is all bent at the bottom. So let's get everything cleaned and we'll assess the damage and work out what to do next. Right, we're over the bench now and we're assessing the damage. This is the main housing for the oil filter, goes on there, and inside here is a pressure release valve, so that maintains the oil pressure. Inside here is a spring and a ball bearing, so that's all fine, which is good. Screw that back up. This is a little drain tap here which is seed solid. Right now I'm not going to worry too much about that. The main focus is going to be sorting out this. So this is bent, and it was attached on like that, and it bent up. And inside, this is what the retaining pin looks like. So this was screwed in here like this, and all it does is hold the lid on. And I think the oil goes up through the middle of it. Or does it? Not sure. No, it can't do. It can't do because that's got a screw in the top. So this holds the oil filter lid on, and it's got this little crimped thing here, and that's because a washer slides down and it supports the bottom of the oil filter. So what I've got to do, I've got to sort that out. Now I either straighten it and weld it and recut the threads. Sounds a bit dodgy, doesn't it? Or I can make a brand new one out of some 9/16 rod. This is 9/16. That's 9/16 and that's 3/8. So 9/16 UNF, 3/8. I could make a brand new one. I might have a crack at just bending it out first, then running a saw halfway through it, TIG welding it round and recutting the thread. Sounds a bit dodgy, that. Although it doesn't take a great deal of force. It might be useful just to do that to at least get it straight. Anyway, I'm waffling on. And when I've done that, or in parallel with, I'm going to bolt this to the side of the engine, and I'm going to screw that back on there, and then I'm going to put something down inside here, and I'm literally going to try and bend it back again. As agriculture as that, it's just going to be the reverse of how it got bent in the first place. So let's crack on with that, shall we? So this is literally 5 minutes later, and all I've done is I've run a saw through the tear, and I've put it in the lathe and just used the lathe to work out which way it's bent, and then put a bar in the end and straightened it. So now it's pretty straight. So I think what I can do is I can certainly use it for a guide to see how much I've actually straightened out the canister, but then what I might be able to do is run a TIG round here, and then run a bead of TIG around it, and then clean it up with a lathe and a 9/16 tap. So could be worth a punt, doesn't it? Saves a lot of effort making a new one. So I've straightened out the pin. I've not yet welded it, but I want to try and bend this casing. So I have a cunning plan, and it is this. So I've cut 2 wooden discs, and they're a nice tight fit in here, and there's another one in there. I'm going to bolt it on. We'll take the discs out, bolt it on, and then I've got this big bit of steel tube that I'm going to thread down through the middle, and I'm literally going to try and bend it backwards. It's quite a long bit of tube. There it is. So, I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Let's give it a go. Right, here goes nothing. Right, I can see it's not quite gone far enough. It's got to go a bit more. Only 5mm. Right, I think we might have done it. So I bent it, put the lid on, and put the bolt in, and it's all about right. I can see that it's kind of bowed out bottom, so I need to take a closer look at that so it doesn't leak like a sieve, but straight enough, I think. Just need to make sure that the mating surface at the bottom is good enough so that it doesn't piss out. It took a bit of force, it took a bit of welly to do, but I think we might be getting there. Right, back at the bench, and I'm looking at this, and I thought it'd work, but it hasn't. So it kind of is upright in that bit between there and there is flat, but it completely curves over here. It's all misshaped, and it's no way that that is going to seal. It needs to be completely flat flange, and it's not. It's a bent flange, and the bent flange is no good. So what I think I'm going to do is cut this out, cut a ring out here, stick it in the lathe, kind of machine out this base, and this bit has got this flange has got a flange on it. It's got an inner flange which gives it some thickness. So what I'm going to do is replace this with a thick steel disc, going to be probably 5mm thick, 5 or 6mm thick, and then I'm going to kind of hammer this out to get some of this height back on it, because it's all kind of squashed down and something like that. I don't know. I'm going to cut that out and weld something on, and hopefully it's going to be okay. So yeah, it's a pain because it's a lot of work just to get something that was just accidentally damaged. But switch on the brakes, let's get cracking. So for some reason I lost the voiceover for this bit, but basically what I did was I put it in the lathe and took out half of it, and then jigsawed the rest out, which was a bit of a hack. And now what I have to do is I have to kind of bend up this lip and get some height back in, so that when I actually machine it flat across the top, I've got a sort of horizontal base to work with. But now that I've cut the base off, it's sort of shit or bust really. There's no going back. So now I'm kind of just agriculturally straightening this thing out, trying to get a bit of height on it. Seems to be working all right actually, just very crudely. So next step is to try and hammer it out on a bit of bar in the vise, get a bit of shape back into it. Seems to be working. Turn it down on a lathe, and I think Bob's your uncle. Right, I've now cut this base off, and it's sort of straightened out quite nicely, and it's obviously the base is level with the end. It's not at an angle. And I've also made this, which is a disc, which I'm going to weld to the bottom. And the way they make these discs is that I tack weld a plate and stick it in the lathe, and I turn it round. So that's pretty much the right size. So now what I'm going to do is stick it back in the lathe and part it off, make the hole in the middle, which corresponds to this hole. Then I can drill these holes in, and then I can weld it all together. And that should be my thing repaired. I've also taken the paint off this, and I'll clean it all up. Might even paint it, who knows. So right, next up, sort this bit out. And as if by magic, it is done. So I parted off this, made the hole, drilled that one there. That's important. That needs to that corresponds with this little hole just here, and that's where I think the feed comes up through that, or back through that. And obviously welded it onto the base, cleaned up the base a bit, give it a coat with this this lanolin based oil, which smells wonderful, and that's pretty much done, ready to go back on. I also took this off again, and I got this this tapered bung out of one of these ports. So these two ports feed off to the oil cooler, and this is 1/4 NPT, I think, so pretty sure it is. So what I'm going to do is, I've got these bungs, and I'm going to just bung up these for the time being. On the other side, I've got this 1/8 NPT here, and because my oil gauge line is 1/8 BSP, which is the British pipe fitting, I bought this little adapter, so that goes on there like that, and then that goes on there like that, which means I can hook up my oil pressure gauge, which I bought from Bewley for 10 quid, and I can make sure that I've got some nice oil pressure when I start this thing up. So that's all pretty good. We're well on track, I think. Put that out of the way. The only thing we need to do now is make a new gasket. This one's a bit knackered, but it's solid enough to make a copy. So I've got some of this. Oops, I've got some of this. What I'm going to do is punch some holes, cut it out. So I'll just make that now, and then when I've made that, we can stick it all back on the engine, make sure everything's fit. Oh, one more thing I forgot to mention. Also repaired this. So I cut the groove in there, straightened it out, and then I tigged round it and recut the thread. It's top of the thread's missing, but that really doesn't matter. Plenty of thread to hold in. The main thing is there's no hole in it. So it saved making a whole new one of those. So when I've made the gasket, we'll plonk it all back on and see if it works. Right, gasket made. So a top tip when you're making these gaskets is always punch the holes before you cut the gasket out, because if you cut the gasket out first and then punch your holes, you run the risk of splitting across here. So we can now offer it all up to the car. Not the car, the engine. There it is, all sorted. You may have spotted that I changed my mind here. I actually decided to reinstate the old low pressure warning sensor in there, so I put this back on, and I've used a male connector here to connect to the 1/8 BSP, but everything else is sorted. Lid goes on quite nicely, rod works fine, new washer underneath there, new gasket under there. Still got the original gasket on the block. It looked pretty good, so I just reuse that, see what happens. So I think that's pretty much done. On to the next thing. So that's pretty good. I've managed to sort out the oil filter canister, but unfortunately there is some less good news, and it's all to do with the sump. Now, I've been pondering the sump for a few weeks now. Do I take it off and have a look, or do I just leave it on, put some oil in and fire it up? Do I, don't I, do I, don't I? I've decided that I really ought to take the sump off, have a look. I expect the crank to be fine, but I expect to find sludge in the bottom. So anyway, I took a closer look today, and unfortunately this is what I found. So I took a closer look at the sump, and unfortunately, I don't know whether you can see that, but I found a dirty great big crack in the sump. Now, I'd never noticed it before because it was covered with oil, but obviously at some stage this has been dropped on the sump and it's cracked it, and that probably explains why I had no oil in it, because it would have all pissed out the bottom, wouldn't it? So I think that pretty much finalises the decision about taking the sump off. So that's going to be easier said than done, of course, because the whole thing is sitting on its sump. So that's my next little problem. So sometime later, the engine is now somewhat jacked up. It's a good 7 inches off the deck, so it means I can now whip the sump off. The question is, what we're going to find inside. Place your bets, everybody. I think we're going to find a load of very nasty black sludge, as well as a dirty great crack. So let's see, shall we? Right, all the bolts are out now, so let's see what happens. Doesn't want to come off. It's been on for what, 70 years, so I don't blame it for, you know, being reluctant. Hold on, there's a bolt left in. There was one bolt left in. Pays to check, doesn't it? Oh, here we go. Bong. So here we are over near the bench, because it's too big to fit on the bench, and we've got this big steel baffle here which I've unbolted, and we can have the big reveal what's inside. So as expected, it is basically beautiful sludge. So that obviously all needs completely cleaning out, because I'm not quite sure it's possible to see it from here. Just inside here, there is a dirty great big crack just in there. It's like a knife or a hatchet has been taken to it, and it's a very sizable crack. I'll do a close-up. A very sizable crack, split, which is going to take a bit of welding. It's actually quite thin as well, so it's going to be quite tricky to weld this, I think, because it's all impregnated with oil as well. So right, time to clean it up, I think. Cleaning going quite well, but we can start to see some of the damage. So got a big split just there, got another split just there, got another little impact there, and there's another hole there. And actually for this one we can see that somebody's attempted to silicone over it. There's nothing like a high quality repair, and that is nothing like a high quality repair. So flipping the whole thing over, flipping thing over, we can start to see that this at some stage looks like it's been sitting outside on the floor. And what probably happened here is that because this is a high point, it was dropped on the floor and it's just cracked out basically both sides of this this piece here. So anyway, let's carry on cleaning, shall we? So we're now at the bench, which I've cleared to make space for the behemoth, and we can see quite clearly the crack there, damage there, and in a few other places. So if I just zoom into here, what I think I'm going to do is drill a little hole at the end of these two, with these two ends. this one crack, hole at each end, which will limit the crack, and then I'm going to actually run a saw blade through the crack to clean off the sides of the cracks. It's still got oil in it, of course, which you can't possibly weld if it's got oil in it. And then I'm going to attempt to quite gently hammer this back into place. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do about that. I'm probably going to have to Dremel out these grooves and get back to clean metal everywhere, and possibly here as well. But let's start with this one first and see how that goes, and then we'll take it from there. So after quite a lot of filing, fettling, drilling, hitting, I've opened up this crack as a thin line, about 1.5 mm all the way through, hammered this bit back. It's not completely flush, but I'm not really bothered about that. And I've tried to file out the whole of this crack. So as much as possible, it's clean metal. I've done it on the inside as well, and I've cleaned it with lots of acetone. So I'm now going to try and weld it, and if I can weld this, I'll attempt the other side. So a bit of a struggle later, and this side is looking reasonably good. It didn't go as well as I hoped, but it's good enough. But you can see what happens here if you attempt to weld something and there's still even the slightest trace of oil left in the crack. So I didn't take this one out good enough. I was fancying the chances on this and it failed. So I basically got to just, it's like grinding out a tooth for a filling. I've got to get out every last trace of oil. Otherwise, that's going to keep on happening and it's just going to destroy the weld. So, yeah, the struggle continues. A bit more fettling later and I've taken out the crack all the way down there. Past where I thought it stopped, went further. That's where the oil was. All the way around. So welding that is going to be even harder. And we have to sneak up on it, probably work up through there, and gradually meet in the middle. Let it cool down between goes. Going to have to be tomorrow now, not now because of that. That's why not now. It's not a great idea to weld after you've been drinking, because the difference between success and a failure is about a nanosecond. So get back on it tomorrow, I think. So the latest episode of Man v Sump continues. This is all right. It's not very pretty, but I'm having to weld basically on top because I keep on hitting these kind of micro seams of oil, and then it just goes all black and horrible, and I have to stop and grind it out and start again. So I also have to let it cool down, of course. So I'm going to try and weld up there, come down from the top, and then sort of meet in the middle somewhere. So that's the plan. So that's what I've got. I kept on having to stop, Dremel it out with this little thing like for doing fillings, and wire brush it and acetone it, and that's probably as good as it's going to get. I might dress it up a little bit, but I think the next thing to do is to test and see if she holds water or oil. So I couldn't find the sump plug anywhere, and I thought, I wonder if I've thrown it out. So I went to the wheelie bin where I dropped all the rags, and I got this massive magnet. I fished around, and what do we have here? We've only got the flipping sump plug. There's a saying, if you find yourself going through hell, keep going. Right, it's 6:30 in the morning. I'm in the kitchen and the sump plug, which I found, is in. And as you can see, I have turned this into the American of France fish tank. And this is full of water, and we can see that it doesn't leak. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord indeed. So now I think it's time to dry it all out and stick it back on the engine. But before we put the sump on, we ought to have a quick look at the crank. So here it is in all its glory. It's a 4 main bearing crank, and each big end journal has got 2 con rods connected to it, and you can see it's got these dirty great big counterbalance weights that are bolted on. There's one up inside there, I don't know if you can see that, and there's one just there. This is obviously the oil pump and oil pump pickup, and thankfully it all looks very good indeed. It's been protected by that sump. Sump took all the impact, and the crank and everything under there looks pretty good. So I think it's time to stick the crank, it's time to stick the sump back on. Right, that's ready to go on now. You might be wondering why it snakes around, and that is because I want to do it on the inside of the holes, but also got these kind of casting marks here, and I kind of want to avoid those because they're all different heights. So there was a very thin gasket on it, but that's gone, so I won't be using that. So time to offer it up. So the sump is now on, and I can honestly say it should have been a 2-man job, not a 1-man job, and Nat's still in bed. But it's gone all right. Will it hold oil? Will it seal? I don't know. There's quite a nice bead of silicone coming out here, but it's on. So next step is lower it back down to the engine mounts, because it's raised up. Stick some oil in. How much oil will it take? Probably about 100 litres by the looks of it. Get cracking on with that then. So that's 10 litres so far. So check, see if it's on the actual dipstick. Place your bets. It is. It is not quite halfway up. So I reckon 2 more litres should do it. Right, it's 12 litres. Yeah, pretty good. Not to the top, but near the top. So I think now we want to see if we get some oil pressure. Spin it over after having cleaned up. So got 12 litres of oil in the engine, and I've rigged up this round here. So this is a battery, obviously, and hooked up a starter solenoid, which is screwed to the plank, so I don't accidentally touch cables everywhere. This one is very dodgy. All its sheathing is missing. And I've got a remote switch, so I can sort of stand around the engine and see what's going on. So first thing to see what's going on is round here. Got the top of the oil filter off. If we look down inside there, can we see in there? Press this. That's So we can see that the oil is being pumped into there, which is good. So what I think I might do is fill up this canister, stick the lid back on, and see what happens. Right, I've filled it up, not quite. And now if I hit the button, so I'm getting more and more, it's filling it up, so I think time to put the lid on and keep on cranking, see if it comes out anywhere else. Right, I pressed it a bit longer and span it over, and the good news is that I'm not getting any leaks from here, so that's working fine. No leaks from there, no leaks from around there. I've noticed that I've got another sticking valve down here. If you just press it, just there, that one's sticking. Also, there's a weird squeaking noise coming from somewhere. Not sure where that is. Screech. But anyway, I think I can close the chapter on the lubrication system now. That's all working quite nicely, I think. I'm getting pressure because it's obviously building up, filling up the canister. So what next? So what next indeed? So we've got a lubrication system that works. We've got an ignition system that works. All we need now is some fuel, and we can try and start her up. So that's what we're going to be focusing on next. In the meantime, if you've liked this, please hit like. Don't forget, I've got a shop selling this awesome merch and dice, and please leave a comment because I like to see what you like, what you don't like. I try to respond to every single one of them. So for now, thanks for watching.